We're KMS Team 1 for podcast production team, and here are some release forms and our We're Excited page. So, we are Team 1 from KMS, podcast production team, Jacob Garais, Liliana Miller, and Matthew Kallstrom. The process that we used for our podcast was 4 steps: researching, so just looking up the topic and stuff that fits under the category that we could talk about; compiling and preparation, so like comparing so that we don't double up on topics; and getting ready for when we record; our actual recording date, so when we all got together and actually like scripted and went through it; and then editing and finalizing. Our researching process took about 3 days. We researched individually, and then we compared and communicated together for what we found so that we don't double up on stuff, and so that we can make sure to cover everything that we could think of. And the process that we used was helpful because we got a lot of sources instead of just having like a couple that all 3 of us found together. And so we got a lot more information for our podcast. For when we compiled and we're preparing, we put all of our information together and shared our sources, and then we could decide what was the most relevant, so we could go over pros, cons, and anything else that we decided to talk about. We used the information that we found to come up with a sample script that we could just follow for our podcast, which just covered the headlights of everything, and then we could just go into detail, and then we actually scheduled our time for when we went to record.
The next part of the process was the recording process. So some of the equipment that we used for this was a Samsung Go mic and then a laptop. And then the software we used to edit it was Audacity. It's an open source software that you can record and edit within. So the reason that the recording proved to be the most difficult was due to COVID-19, background noise, and then also the time it ended up taking. So COVID played a role in this because we really didn't have access to all the equipment in studios that we would have liked to have access to record this. The background noise was because we didn't have access to like a recording place. We had to do it in a home, which has background noise. And then the time it ended up taking was due to the fact that we were all bouncing our schedules around, and it was pretty hard to find a good time to meet up. And then once we did get it, we also had to redo it due to poor audio quality. So the editing was all done within Audacity. We chose this because I had prior experience editing and recording within it, and it made it a really quick and streamlined process. And then the publishing process was done on SoundCloud, and that just consisted of creating an account and then uploading it from Audacity. This is the editing interface. So you can record using the big red button in the top left, and then that would just create a new track and it would begin recording. And then on the top right, there's a green bar, and that would be the mic monitoring, so you can see how much sound's coming in and coming out. And then on the top left, there's the taskbar, and then also the simple controls.
Some of the challenges we faced making this podcast included scheduling and finding a time that worked for all 3 of us, poor audio quality due to background noise and interruptions, and a lack of quality equipment. So if we could do this project again, we would change a few things, including having multiple recording sessions to make sure we got the best take, getting better equipment, and finding a dedicated recording space. So these are our sources for the pictures that we used in the PowerPoint, and we have other sources named in the PDF file. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. What challenges did your team face when creating this project?
So we faced COVID because having to stay safe and not being sure if we could get all the equipment that we wanted to use and the places that we wanted to record. So we ended up just having to do it in a home with a USB mic instead of in like a more studio type place with better equipment.
Kind of adding to that, that USB mic that we ended up using, normally we would have probably ended up using just a local community area where there's already recording equipment, such as one of the churches in the area. But instead, we just used a USB driver mic because it allowed us to record from home, and it was fairly quick and easy to do. Lily, do you have any challenges that we faced?
There were a lot of interruptions, from background noise to pets to siblings, and if we had been in a more secure place, those would not have happened.
Okay, what research did your team conduct prior to creating the podcast?
So the research process really consisted of us going about it on our own. And then once we all researched more a broadened topic, building off of the prompt, we brought it all together, and then we got together and sorted through it and picked what we thought would be the most relevant and important to address in our podcast. And that's the information that we ended up using.
Okay, what task took the longest in the editing process?
In the editing process, I'd say definitely the most time-consuming task was really just editing out the mistakes, stutters, ahs, and really all those tiny little transition words that people use that are just fillers and don't really serve a purpose. Those happen way more frequently than I feel a lot of people realize, and it did take a considerable amount of time to get them out.
What problem-solving skills did you apply in this event?
We had to be very flexible because with all of our schedules conflicting and trying to find a safe way to get together, we had to do a lot of thinking, and we had to lead, and we had to just find a good time where each of us were free to do it.
We also had to be adaptable, which is pretty close to flexible, but it's a new contest and we hadn't done anything like this before really. So we all had to just learn it together and adapt to the new contest and the rules and the topic and just everything about it.
Kind of adding on that, we also had to be quite creative in doing this. The equipment that we used, the Samsung Go mic, that we actually don't have any audio recording equipment at the school. So I actually reached out to a family friend and we borrowed his mic to record. So it was just small stuff like that where we had to kind of think outside the box and think who would be able to help us in this process and just kind of get it all put together piece by piece.
Are you done?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was like another 3 minutes of questioning, so the whole thing altogether was like 8 minutes.